Well, without further ado, Maureen, thank you for being with us here tonight, and we look forward to what you're going to share with us.
Thank you. On behalf of CoSA, I want to thank you and Better Life for making this possible. I want to welcome all the folks who are on the call tonight. There's four things that I would like to see happen with this presentation, if it's possible. One is I hope that it will help those of you at Better Life to be able to explain CoSA to the sex offenders that Adam was talking about that you meet in your work. Secondly, to recognize more clearly who qualifies and who would benefit from Circle. And thirdly, how to refer clients to CoSA. And last but most important, tonight I hope will be the beginning of a partnership between CoSA and Better Life, and that we can work more closely together. Tina, I think Adam mentioned Tina, and she will be assisting me and managing the slide presentations. It's the first time we've done it together, so Tina's very proficient at this. I'm a little slow sometimes on Zoom, so hopefully it goes well. I will read part of the slides that she's showing and not all of it, and sometimes I will add things that I think are more important for you folks than maybe are there. So you can follow along with them or just listen, either way, whatever you like. So Tina's got slide 1 up, which is our logo for Vancouver Fraser Valley, Circles of Support and Accountability. Secondly is the origins of Circles and Support. For those of you who've been around a long time, or as long as I have, I don't know if you would remember, but it was back in 1994 when law was passed that inmates could be held till the last day of their, until their warrant. Prior to that, they were always released on their stat release. So what happened at that time is men predominantly were released into the community on their warrant with no other support. And that's how it started, really, with that change in the legislation around detention. CoSA nationally, I'm not going to read all that. The only thing I want to mention is that we are part of CoSA Canada. And we have been almost from the start, off and on. In April of 2022, CoSA Canada's funding through public safety ended, and consequently ours ended too, which is just over a year now. So CoSA Canada's role now is continually looking for funding for the sites. They haven't been successful up until now. Here in Vancouver Fraser Valley, we're working very, very hard locally trying to find funding. Had a little bit of success, but nothing close to being able to maintain or have a sustainable program. Since April of last year, and maybe 6 months prior to that, a lot of my focus has been on fundraising, grant writing, looking to that type of thing. And we keep hoping that, you know, something will break. We'll see what happens. So you can keep us in your prayers for that. We do have some donors, which is really good, and some very small contracts. So CoSA locally, I'm going to read most of that because it's important, I think, for the understanding. Fraser Valley CoSA began just for the core members being released from federal institutions, only being released to the Fraser Valley and Surrey. And that was just for warrant expiry at that time. That's all CoSA was, because they had nobody else. They were released at warrant. They had no halfway houses, no other support. So originally, for the first 8-9 years, that was all we worked with, was warrant expiry. In 2010, we expanded to include core members released to the Vancouver area, and we then changed our name to Vancouver Fraser Valley CoSA. In 2016, we expanded to include core members released from provincial institutions. So I would say, I haven't counted as of today, but between 25 and 35% are usually provincial offenders. But they're always sexual offenders, right? People who have been convicted of a sexual offense. In 2019, due to COVID, one of the good things that came out of COVID was that we added virtual circles. And now we're expanding to include all of BC and the Yukon, which is really good to know when you have people who are moving out of the province. And we have a whole, not going to go into it on this presentation, but a lot of ways to have effective virtual circles, right from ways to introduce ourselves, to celebrate with our core member in another part of the province, how he gets introduced and meets the volunteers. So it's really quite wonderful. So if you can remember, they don't have to be going to Vancouver, Fraser Valley area to have a circle of support. At any given time, we have between 35 and 40 core members. At the moment, we have 42, which is almost more than we can handle, but we try never to say no to anyone who is high risk. We don't take people who have a lot of other support because we're stretched to the limit. We have, as of today, 93 volunteers on circles. That isn't counting our board and our committees and what have you, right? Yeah. So locally continued, from 2003 to today, we've had, I think, over 260 circles. We work with multiple police forces because we cover such a huge area, parole and probation. And now with virtual, we have even more parole officers and correctional people. Catholic Justice Service Society delivers the program, but we operate as CoSA Vancouver Fraser Valley. We are a separate society, separate than the Archdiocese of Vancouver. So we really operate on our own and responsible for our own funding, etc. The vision, I'm going to leave that to you to read because you can read our vision at any time. Our mission statement, just going to look at the bottom part. CoSA circles address the root causes and risk factors of reoffending by holding released offenders accountable. We also support them in their task of successfully reintegrating into the community. There's a couple of very important comments I'd like to make about this. CoSA is not just about friendship. It is not a coffee club. It is about accountability and risk factors. Some people sometimes find that hard to accept, I think. And what we've learned, without accountability, we run the risk, and a circle runs a risk of enabling the core member. We know their whole history, we read their file, and it's very, very important that we hold their feet to the fire around their risk of reoffending. Friendship is also very important because they build a relationship with us. And I can't tell you the number of times that we're aware of things going south long before police are or their parole officer, because we have a relationship with them and they trust us and tell us. And often when it is going south, we can advocate for them and help them and turn things around. Yes, okay. So our values, just to kind of sum them up, I won't go into them. The human dignity, we believe everyone believes to be treated with respect and dignity. And that's very, very important in CoSA, especially for a sex offender who often is not treated with respect or dignity, not in the prison, not anywhere else. One of the reasons I do this work, honestly, is I've never been offended against sexually. I do it because I really and truly got so disgusted when I started as a counselor, originally hired in the federal prisons, and I saw how sex offenders were viewed, how anybody who had, murdered a couple of people was way up here. And it really, really irritated me. There were so little resources for them, and they were so vulnerable to everybody else. So that's just a little side on why I do what I do. Under transformative growth, we believe that each person who wants to change needs a community of support. And I think we really can relate to better life, because that's what you do. You give them a community of support. And as Adam referred to, not every sex offender can have a community of support, especially in their church. And we believe that, and that's the gap that we will fill, right? So, and it is important to note that regardless of their background, their sexuality, gender, or our identity, we have BIPOC, we have transgender. Of our 42 right now, we just happen to have 2 transgender, 2 women. Predominantly, we are more male, but we also have others. We have a couple of Black, we have quite a few Asian. So we really have a very good cross section of core members. Okay, now to sort of the meat and potatoes. The first part, a circle is made up of 3 to 4 trained volunteers who commit for a minimum of 1 year to support and hold accountable a core member. We try on every circle, and there's very few exceptions, but there are some. We try to always have male and female, as well as experienced and new volunteers on every circle, just to make sure that they're getting a good balance of gender and a good balance of experience. We only operate in the community. We don't provide support in prison. And this is why I'm so excited about this partnership with you, because you are in the prisons and you can get the word out to sex offenders who might need CoSA. When a circle's closed, there's no further contact between the core members and volunteers. And a lot of our volunteers have had trouble with that. There's 2 big reasons for that. One, we need the volunteers in the community. You can imagine if we had 260 up to now and we have 42 right now, if we were to still maintain contact with them, I mean, we couldn't function. We just couldn't do it. And the other thing is CoSA is support and accountability. So if a circle is closed and there's any friendship or contact kept up, it's only support. It isn't that accountability of 3 or 4 people, helping them with their risk factors. So we become then not a CoSA without accountability, and we're very, very firm on that. So our core members, thanks. You're doing a great job, Tina, of keeping up here with me. They've all been convicted of at least 1 sexual offense, and includes those under federal and provincial, which I already mentioned, as well as those who have completed their court orders. That's something many times we thought, it would be great to, when they're finished their order, that's it. We have fellows developmentally age 8. Can you imagine when they're finished their order, if they lose the only support they have? Many will be at a risk all their life. So we never, ever say, as long as they want to be accountable, as long as they're willing to say that they need help managing their risk, then they can have a CoSA. We've had a couple of very long-term ones, a couple of LTSO, one in particular who just completed his 10 years. And we will go on to support him because he has many, many difficulties. And I think without someone or a group to continually say, who did you see this week? And what did you do when you saw that child? Or what did you do when, it's very difficult, especially if they're developmentally very, very young. It's very natural. They can't have a relationship with an adult woman. An adult woman, isn't going to pay any attention. And they have their stuffies and their teddies. So they need constant help. I'm not saying these are the majority. They're probably the exception, but we do have them. And so we can't ever say, hey, the time's up, corrections they have no parole officers. They have, they really need help. They're on their own, no residency, what have you. The core members have to make a commitment to be a part of CoSA for at least 1 year. Very few are only 1 year. Sometimes that's all they need. They'll get a job and move on. But it is the exception. Most of the ones we take have kind of reached a bottom in their life. They've lost pretty much everything, families, etc. So, yeah. Our core members range in age. I think our youngest right now is 24. And our oldest, I believe, is 79 right now. So there's a huge range. They're predominantly male. And for many, CoSA is their only source of friendship and support. Am I going too slow? How's the time here, Adam? Oh, I can't hear
you. You're doing great, Maureen. Thank you.
Are you sure? Because what is our time limit?
We said an hour, so you're good.
Okay, good. Okay. So but I want to make sure you really get a good picture of what we do, right?
We appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Our volunteers, the most important thing they bring is their human presence and care. We do not provide counseling, programming, or professional supervision. What we try to do is hear what they're saying, help them to hear what they say, look at their options, and what do they want to do, and how can we support them in that. Our volunteers are both male and female, ranging in age from 30s to 80s. They come from all walks of life. I mean, I don't broadcast it. We have defense lawyers. We have other lawyers. We have a couple of dentists, doctors. We have city workers. We have one waitress. We have it just, on every group. But we do have, I haven't done it for a while, but our median age was pretty good. I think our median age was around 58, 59, which is a pretty good age, considering, which I'll talk about after. We don't usually, or I can do right now, we don't usually take anyone younger than 30. Some of the CoSAs across Canada do, and with exceptions we do. And the reason for this is circles can go on for years. I mean, the dangerous offenders, the LTSOs, 8, 10 or 2 years. What we have found with young volunteers, and they always want to, right? But the problem is not that they're not really good. They're really good, but they don't stay. Their lives aren't settled. And you cannot, when a volunteer leaves, it changes the whole dynamic. You can't just add someone. You've already, the first meeting in a circle, they do their disclosure. Everybody knows exactly what they've done the very first night of the meeting. So you can imagine if after 5 or 6 months, somebody leaves, one of those 3 or 4, the whole circle dynamic changes. And I really hesitate to add new people. It is very, very hard on the core member. One, they feel abandoned. Why did they leave me? I mean, that's always, no matter how we work with them, it's difficult. So there are exceptions, and I do find them excellent volunteers. It's more that their lives just aren't settled enough to do it. So, and I do know back east and in different places, CoSA has younger people and, graduate students and what have you. Come summer, their circle's almost shut down. The coordinator does it. And that's not a program. To me, it isn't coordinator driven. Our program is volunteer driven. And that's so important, right? So how does a circle work? They're referred by a parole officer, an elder, a chaplain, and hopefully now by other support workers being Better Life, right? Potential core members may voluntarily request a circle. We struggle with making it very clear to both corrections and the Parole Board of Canada. It can't be a requirement. They keep trying, and I think it's because they see the effect of CoSA and they want them to have it. But that defeats our whole purpose if it's not voluntary. And I struggle with my diplomacy sometimes with the parole officers because they say, no, I'm going to tell them they have to. And I'm going to say, no, then I'm not going to take them. This is, it defeats what we are about. This is something they choose to do over and above their parole or their correctional suit. So they take ownership of their offenses and they have to be committed to change. The circle meets with the core member, the first meeting, who discloses his offense history, and a covenant is established with the circle members, and everybody signs it. It's not a legal document. We usually do this a month or two after, when we have a good understanding of what they need. Do they need to attend AA? Do they need, whatever, looking at their particular needs. And the other half of the covenant is them telling us what their expectations are, what they want of the circle. We can't always give them everything they want, and they don't always give us. So it's a give and a take, and then we come up with this covenant, right? Let me see. So the circle meets weekly to assess risk factors and provide support. One of the things I didn't mention, and I'm not sure if there's a place here, but I think it's important, is that we do not evangelize, not at all. We try to find out what they believe and help them to live out their own beliefs. It's really important in CoSA because there's a tremendous imbalance of power. We have all the power. They want the circle, right? And in the past, like I've been doing this over 20 years, right? And in the beginning, we weren't nearly as firm on this. And then I had to say to a couple of guys who really I'd known in the prisons and said, hey, what's with this? You going to church? Are you doing this? And they kind of look at me and I say, is this something you really want to do? And they'll say, well, there's good food after church, Maureen, or, I really want their support, or, I don't want to lose them, and they care a lot. So it's really important. Some come to the point of wanting to go. I've heard them say, you know what, these volunteers are so great, and they're faith-based people. You don't deny your own faith, but you don't try to evangelize or to bring them in. And then the core members will say, you know what, you people really have something, or you're always so happy. Tell me about your faith. Or so that can happen, but usually the first 6 months is hard work on their sexuality, their deviancy, whatever the issues. Okay, so the next parts I'm going to pretty much leave to you to look at yourself. There are more about risk. Sorry, I moved on to CoSA works, Tina. Just they're more recidivism rates, right? And how effective CoSA is. So you can look at those studies yourself. If you want more information, Tina or I will send it to you. But I want to be sure that we have time to look at the 2 documents that I think would be so good for Better Life to be familiar with, and for questions. How's that?
That sounds great, Maureen.
So Tina, if we could look at our, good. We're just running through there's our intake form. And that is what I give to any parole officer, any core member who asks. And this is the first thing they fill out. Then I interview them, either in the institution, or sometimes I can't do it till you're in the community, just lack of staffing. It is my hope that we will be able to go back to that. I used to be able to do that. I didn't have so many core members. But if you notice, the top is the kicker for the guys. It says supplying the information below is an acknowledgement that the applicant wants to work with a CoSA circle in managing their risk to reoffend. So the first thing almost every fellow will say to me is, oh, I would never do that again. And I say, well, I hope you wouldn't. I wouldn't accept you in CoSA if you thought for 2 seconds you were going to do that again. But understanding where you've been, what the memories are, your history. And I give a very personal example. I say, I chain smoked until 25 years ago, right? And I can tell you right now, if I had a crisis where my family was wiped right out, all of my family, children, grandchildren, I might pick up a cigarette. And you, on the other hand, might fall back into your, we all have our history and our past. I said that very quickly. I give them a more detailed explanation of what that risk to reoffend looks like. Everything is going well, probably you won't. But everything falls apart, or you're all sorts of things that can happen. So I don't know. I think it's pretty clear what's on there. I don't know. You can look at it. You can always email me after questions or anything. But I think we could look quickly at the core member brochure. We have a general brochure and we have a core member. And this is the core member. And I think this is, I don't want to say our Bible, but in a way it's what we can do and what we can't do, and our expectations of them. And it really, I think, would be really good for you to have at your fingertips. If Adam can print some off for you, if not, we could do it and get it to the office. But it would be helpful to have this, even to take it into the institutions, or some of the chaplains have them posted in the institutions, but some don't, I know. And also they're all updated, so I probably haven't kept them updated. This is all quite new. We only had a general brochure before. So you've listened to me long enough. I'm open for questions.
Hi, Maureen. My name's Dean. I'm just a volunteer with Better Life. I've been working with a young man named Kelvin, who is at a halfway house. And the last time we were together, we went to church on Easter Sunday. And I was just wondering, what's okay, this is a stupid question and you've already spoke about it, but this also includes pedophiles, right?
Includes what?
Pedophiles?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So what's the percentage of pedophiles as compared to other sex crimes in your core members?
I have to look at it, Dean. It's a great question, but what I honestly feel, our core members kind of go into 3 different categories. They go into the ones who have offended against women, the ones who have raped and what have you. The other 2/3 are pedophiles. And then I break that down into a lot of men or women who were abused sexually when they're younger in their own families, who actually believe that this is okay until they've gone to prison and learned that it isn't. I don't call them true pedophiles, but they have offended against children. And then there's the ones who are developmentally very delayed. And then there's the ones who are the true pedophiles, right? And if I were to look at the 42 and say who are true pedophiles, I'd have to count, but I would say what I think are 9 or 10 who are good IQs, they're functioning. But don't quote me on that, because I'm just, but over the years it's changed, right? but yeah, I would say maybe not quite a third.
Good. Thank you for answering.
Thank you for your question.
Mhm.
It's good to see you there, Andy. Andy, we're so fortunate to have Andy. He's a CoSA volunteer as well as a Better Life volunteer. And
Hello, Maureen.
good to see you there.
Yeah, I do mountain, Maureen. So I think that's why we have that fellow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it sort of clear from what I said, or have you got lots, or is it all kind of a blur with me just going on like that?
No, it's pretty clear, actually. I understand what you're doing or what you're attempting to do. No, it's pretty clear to me anyways. I understand that the churches would be reluctant to help a child offender. I understand that quite well. I would have a little trouble with that myself, I think. So, yeah.
And it's interesting because most of them, and probably I mentioned this to Adam, who said Father Richard has looked at it, but a lot of our offenders are not allowed to go to church in any way, shape, or form. And probably from a charter standpoint, it's I don't know what to say, but basically they don't want to get in any more trouble and they're not allowed to do it. And it's really, really difficult. Now, I mentioned we don't evangelize. We do have a few who come in who are faith background. So we will suggest then, if that is the case, because I would say out of our 93 on circles, I would say we only have maybe 5 or 6 volunteers who aren't faith-based.
Okay.
All of the rest are faith-based or church-going people from different denominations. We have a Sikh, we have, we have a variety. So they're not all Christian, but the majority are Christian, right? So yeah, it's really tough. So in those cases, if they say they are faith-based and we're not pushing it, right? We will suggest then there'll be a little, either a prayer or a little reflection at the start. And if they are able to do it themselves, we will ask them to come prepared to share something they've read or a reflection, right? If they're not able, but are faith-based, then we will ask one of the volunteers to work with them before the meeting, suggesting something based on their belief. Because that's really important. Like I say, the imbalance of power, I saw that happen too many times in my early years. So we're really there for two reasons. One, to see that person be successful in their reintegration. But almost equal to that is community safety. I mean, I can't say it anywhere else, but I have 13 grandchildren. I have 3 great-grandchildren, right? Oh. I had 5 children. Like, if you think for 2 minutes I am, not concerned, I am. But I can tell you, when they have a circle, that community is far safer. And this is what I keep trying to say to funders and what have you, like, look, we're public safety. Do you know we're doing your job for you? And the fact that the parole officers want them so badly to have a CoSA circle tells you, because, at first they weren't so big on us getting in and reading their files, but they see it works. They know it works, right?
Well, Maureen, we certainly share some of these if not all of these concerns. I mean, I've often thought to myself as I'm talking with, trying to raise funds and write grants and things like that, if we could just put a puppy in somebody's hands, and get their hearts to bleed over the puppy, maybe we could get some more funding for what we do. But, the reality is that I think if the Canadian public knew, like I saw your figure, over 80% drop in recidivism in terms of and I think our friend Bob Buckham has sort of led me through this to say, to not commit those similar types of offenses. So maybe a lesser offense, or it's not that they would never offend, but in terms of sexual offenses, which in the context of sexual offenses, that is actually incredible and amazing. So, to all of our Better Life team, I guess in a way, I'll use the word that you said you don't use in your circles. I'll be an evangelist and say to our team, we want to partner with CoSA, all of our men and women that have sexual offenses. Here is a context and an environment and a community that's going to make a difference. And I think, whew, how amazing is that? Sorry, okay, I'll calm down now.
Very, very amazing. And if Andy, if there are people who can't volunteer for Better Life, or they're not part of church, please keep us in mind. Or if any of your wonderful volunteers have time to do something else, as well as Better Life, I can tell you honestly that, just like what you said, Dean, your comfort zone, my comfort zone with these people, you will grow as a Christian and you will grow as a person. And I always think, and if Mother Teresa were here today, and I think, and I don't say this as a Catholic, I say this as a person, I am a Catholic who respects Mother Teresa. If she were here today, yes, she would feel bad for the prisoners and the homeless and that. But I can tell you, she would say, I believe the poorest of the poor are the sex offender. They are the most hated. They're the most despised. That's why I do this. It ticks me off so badly that everybody, even people of faith, think everybody's better than a sex offender. And in reality, the recidivism rate is pretty low anyway for sex offenders. Then you add a CoSA circle, how low it is, how much it's decreased. My goodness, we're missing the boat here. We really are. So I'd also like you to really think, if you know anybody who maybe isn't doing Better Life, or who might also help. We are most in need of volunteers in Abbotsford. I don't know if you're probably aware, most of you, but we're pretty good in Vancouver, Surrey. We're doing well. Abbotsford, we don't have the feeder churches. As for Catholic churches, there's only 2, so we don't have feeder churches. And every time we try to get into other churches, if we don't have a member there, we can't get in. And the problem is, it used to be that 70% of all core members went to Vancouver. Most of the halfway houses and wouldn't take any DOs, they wouldn't take any high-risk sex offenders. And nobody tells me why they are now. My theory is that when the halfway houses were sitting empty, all of a sudden the rules changed and Abbotsford took them. I mean, I could be wrong. This is just my theory. So what are we doing? We are sitting with way less of a population to recruit volunteers from, and way more. We have more core members in Abbotsford than we have in Vancouver. And more than Surrey. Has never been the case till COVID.
Don
Hi,
Ibsen
Don.
here. How you doing?
Oh, good to see. That's Don Ibsen. Good to see you, Don.
We go back a long ways.
Don't talk like that. It makes me feel very old.
But we're still here.
I know. Thank
And we do
God.
it-
Every day is a blessing.
We do it because we enjoy it, and God has gifted us to do it. Anyway, I just want to say a couple things. Your presentation was excellent. Yeah, we'd like to have some brochures. As I go in, guys phone me and I go in and do intake interviews for Better Life. Man, I'd say I'm in PI, and I'd say half or more have sexual offenses. So we bump into it all the time, and I always mention CoSA, too. But to have a brochure in that would be great, and you guys do great work. The other thing I want to say in my experience is some of these guys go in the prison and they
Don,
have
I
to
can't hear you. Can you
Okay,
speak into your mic?
yeah, just a second. I'm going to change this up a bit. Just okay, just trying to. Okay,
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
That's clear, yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
I'm
Don.
sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, having a brochure would be great because probably 50% or more of the guys I do intakes in and PI have sexual offenses. I find a lot of that. And then I was going to say, over the years, you know, until a guy really decides that he wants to work with the system instead of fight it, they don't get anywhere. But sex offenders have a really tough go a lot of times when they get out. But it can be done when a guy really makes that decision and then has the support of CoSA or people like Bob Birch and others that are in our, that will walk with them through. I mean, housing is a tremendous thing. They get out at WED and they don't have housing and then they're published once they get a house. And oh man, I can go through the stories, but these guys can make it with the support that and just the determination that they need.
So well said.
And it's such a joy to see some of them get through their 810s, so that might last 2 years. For anybody who don't know, an 810 order is an order after their warrant expiry that is a provincial supervision for, and with a lot of times a lot of restrictions for 2 more years. And some guys look at that and they say, I'll never be able to do it. But, you know, we just tell the guys, listen, you can do it. We'll help you, but you got to work with your probation officer. If you don't work and gain the trust of your probation officer, you're done. And they can do it. They do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for some of our team, Maureen, as we've been talking about this and some of the challenges we face, I mean, we call some church communities, some multi-faith communities, partner communities. And that means that the community has invited us to have a higher level or closer relationship with them. And I think there's still maybe a bit of misunderstanding even amongst the Better Life team. And the misunderstanding is, oh no, no faith communities, no churches, no mosques will allow an individual with a sexual offense to participate in their community. In many cases with what we call our partner communities, that is not the case. And so I especially in this context, want our team to know that we work with the parole officer of the individual and that faith community, and we provide as much guarantee as we can that the individual, as you would say, Maureen, the core member, is accompanied by the volunteer at all times when they are in the building. And the parole officer often goes into those partner communities and makes sure that, you know, in terms of their children's area and so forth, there's the plan to protect or whatever it may be in that context. So just to say that there is opportunity, friends, that we need to continue to nurture. I would say the biggest challenge we have right now has been with our trans members. And, you know, probably mostly our churches and maybe even mostly, as you're finding, I think, Maureen, and the religious right of Abbotsford, there's just no openness whatsoever. We're not letting trans people into our churches. And so that's our real challenge right now. So just in terms of the larger context, the question I want to have clarity on, Maureen, if you can help our team. So let's say Andy, Now, it's not fair. Andy is a CoSA volunteer, so he knows. But let's say Andy didn't have a clue. And he's got an individual that he is supporting at Mountain, and they've had a sexual offense history. Andy's going to give that individual the CoSA brochure. He's going, the second step is the member says, yes, I want to be a part of CoSA. What is that second step, Maureen?
The second step, and I didn't clarify that, is not till maybe 4 or 5 months before release, before expected release. Because the problem is they have no idea where they're going to be released to. They're sure they're going to Abbotsford, they go to Vancouver, they're sure they're going. So I can't put a group together for them until I have a better idea. So if they give them that brochure at any time, a year or 2 years or whatever, and say, look, then you need to be contacting, my name is on the brochure, you need to be contacting Maureen. Either your parole officer, the chaplain will always do it. I know the chaplains in most of the institutions, right? We'll all give them a phone call. You know, some don't want the chaplain, some don't want the PO, but someone needs to give them a call to me. But first, that person who's going to give them a call will send me the intake form, because I want their history, their background before I talk to them. So, but I do like that 4 or 5 months. For example, now I don't know what will happen, but right now I have 7 on the waiting list coming up in the next 3 or 4 months. They may not all get parole. I find out when I talk to them, parole, are you supporting them? Is the parole officer supporting them? Then if they are, I know it's probably an 80% chance they're out. Okay, tick this box, gonna need volunteers here. So yeah, so that's the procedure. Brochure at any time. The core member brochure is also good to give them a general brochure. And both of those, I think Tina will put up or has on the screen. I don't know if you can print them off, Adam, or what the procedure is, or if you'd like us to print some off for you, whatever you decide. And the intake form, it's a 1-page sheet, and you can't take anything in or anything out, so you can't bring it out to me, but you can have them send. Our address is in Abbotsford on Town Line Road, or if it's a PO, they'll usually just email it to me if they have concerns. Rarely do they, but if they do, they fax it to the CCC to me, the Chilliwack Correctional Center. I live in Chilliwack, and I pick it up there. So that's the first step, but I do like to talk to them probably 4 months before a tentative release, whether or not it happens. So I have a good understanding what they need, what kind of volunteers they need. I have a few volunteers who won't work with a fellow who's raped a woman. We have a couple of volunteers who have been raped in the past, right? And we have a couple who do not want to work with pedophiles. We have a couple, you know, like it's just a different, we have some who say, I really like to work with one who also has addiction issues, because maybe they've been a drug and alcohol counselor. Maybe they've had an issue themselves. So it gives 4 months. I need at least, I feel, to get a sense of the fellow. I'm hoping now with Tina on board and a little more support that I will be able to get back into the institutions. And when I can do that, excuse me, I can take the intake form back out with me, which is really good. And hopefully that day will come if we get a little more funding for staffing, right? So, yeah,
Well,
but we really rely on 93 volunteers is what we do.
Just to clarify the intake form, should we be handing that out, or should the chaplains or the POs, like, who fills that out? What's the best procedure?
Sometimes the guys fill it out and they don't want anyone to see it, chaplain or PO, and they mail it to our address. Some have a good relationship. Lots of times the parole officer has told them about it, said to me, Maureen, what's the next step? I email it to her. or him, and they mail it back. So it's whatever, Dawn, but I do think the brochure first, and then if they're interested, I think you should say, do you have any relationship with your chaplain, or how do you feel about your PO, or do you want an address to mail this to CoSA? You know,
So
there's-
we should carry a intake form also.
yeah, I don't think there should be a problem with taking that in
Yeah, no,
with your
we carry
papers.
our brochures in and
Yeah.
everything. That's
Yeah.
not an issue.
Yeah,
Never
and
had an issue.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Thanks
And
for the
be
clarification.
conscious. Some of them do not want to be seen with a CoSA brochure because that's telling people that they're saying.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very conscious. I'll put it in a little packet and yeah. And
Yeah.
I've even had guys who say, oh, Maureen, you know, I really want to talk to you, but I don't want people to think I'm a sex offender.
Right,
And,
yeah.
and these are guys who aren't sex offenders. And I say, well, too bad. I guess you're not talking to me, right? Because they really don't want to be seen. So we have to really protect the sex offender.